So, you want to fight too? One of the very first sentences uttered by Tokita Ohma in Kengen Ashura. Besides being eerily reminiscent of a famous scene from the movie Only God Forgives, it also sets the tone for the rest of the series, the main emphasis of the narrative centering around martial arts encounters, with our eponym hero acting as one of the many fighters risking their life to obtain victory. On top of that, it opens a window into the mind of the man known as the Ashura, as it encapsulates most of his life philosophy and is the deciding trait that makes him a leader among his peers. What most people nowadays call an alpha male, a concept now rendered silly by men so weak that the only tool they have to counter it is their resentment. To them, Ohma would respond, "So, you wanna fight too?" This would not be done in an effort to shame them into submission, but rather serve as an attempt to remind them what it means to be a man, by jolting their ego back into action. If what they feel in that instant is fear instead of aggression, then they know that the problem goes to the very core, as the appropriate answer to provocation isn't cowardice, but pride. This doesn't necessarily mean that you should fight whenever challenged, but rather that you should always entertain that option, which then allows you to decide whether or not to engage in a physical confrontation. To be in full control of your emotions, you first need to accept them. To not become a victim of violence, you must then embrace it first. Running away from your fears, on the other hand, is avoidance, which only reinforces their grasp on you and turns you into a perpetual victim. Being the educated barbarian, a sophisticated savage, that is the way of the fighting stoic. This peculiar mix of unbridled machismo and stoic principles is exemplified by Ohma through each of his actions, making him a particularly good example of the type of virtuous masculinity that is lacking representation in Western media, and that most boys are in desperate need of. A thirst that the movie Fight Club brought back to the surface in 1999. By becoming a worldwide sensation that has since become a cultural icon for men around the globe. We need strong role models to become the best versions of ourselves, as they reveal the way that was always our own to walk, but that developed this modern world has since barred us from entering. And strong Ohma is, his word carrying all the weight of the determination that is needed to be your own person in this environment of ours that so fiercely detests independence. Mean everything you say and imbue your sentences with intent, confident in the fact that no one can make you change your mind unless you let them. This doesn't mean that you are never to vary your opinions, but rather that you will be the one deciding if and when such an ideological shift occurs, leaving indecisions and meekness aside and focusing on moving through life with a purely unashamed confidence in your choices. Living a simple existence detached from modernity, Ohma leads a life that wouldn't be too far off that of even Diogenes, only eating meat from animals he caught with his own two hands and spending his nights in a rundown mansion with no beds, roof, or heating system of any sort. He is waging war against comfort and refusing all the commodities that some of us have come to accept as not only desirable but also necessary for survival. An illusion birthed from the easy existences brought forth by medical and technological advancements, which have done nothing but spoil us into a submission of sorts, terrified of losing the very amenities that made us soft in the first place. The more you have, the less you are. This is a similar type of lesson to that taught by Tyler Durden, who warned us of the evil of consumerism and preached minimalism as a worthy replacement, rightfully saying to reject the basic assumptions of civilization, especially the importance of material possessions, as the things you own end up owning you. By pushing away those distractions, you not only break free from the money-seeking mindset that would have you spend your entire life accumulating things you don't need to impress people you don't like, but you also make space for what is truly important to you. For Ohma, it's to become the strongest. That's it. Just select a path and stick to it, regardless of what other people think or what society tells you is worthy of pursuit or not. Take a look at this so-called society and the people who fester in it. Do you want to be like them? I think not. Well, the surest way to never let that happen is to just do whatever you want. Not in an effort to be a contrarian, but just as a means to follow your own way. This purity of mind is a key characteristic of the fighting Stoic, who behaves honestly, not only with the world, but most importantly with himself. This will make you keep people around you accountable, as nothing is more insulting to the righteous than those who lie to themselves. Calling out hypocrites for their ideological inconsistencies might not make you very popular with people, but is the surest way to stay true to your ideals. This also requires a discipline of steel on your part, as one shouldn't throw stones from glass houses. Constantly challenging the fortitude of those around you will require impeccable standards in your actions and thoughts, as nothing excites the mediocre mind more than to point the finger at the strong for his perceived wavering. If you don't want to be one of them, you therefore must be tougher on yourself than you are on others. A quirk that characterizes Ohma and allows him to effectively point out self-contradiction. Sticking to his principles makes him attractive in the eyes of his peers, who perceive him to be a man worthy of respect. No one will trust you if you don't trust yourself. That is an essential lesson to learn if you want to become alpha. If we refer to the naturalistic definition of the term, the alpha is not the one that dominates by force, at least not in the long run. He might have gained this position via displays of might, during a fight with the previous holder of that title, but to conserve the crown takes more than just brawn. The leader of a group remains at its helm because of his sound decisions, caring nature, and efforts towards the preservation of the pack, and not just because he fights tooth and nails to conserve his position. Any alpha that stays in power through terror is no true alpha, as the group he leads is now made up of slaves instead of individuals, which defeats the very concept of the collective. Instead, you want people to follow you because they perceive benefits and not because they are coerced into it. The right way to accomplish this is to lead by example. Just by being, you also allow others to be. This is the true meaning behind the saying, "You wanna fight too?" It isn't meant as a way for the alpha to crush the beta and remain top dog. Rather, it is an invitation to join the dance. Do you want to fight too? Means, do you want to take a shot at becoming the alpha? Do you want to become a leader? Do you want to be your own person and inspire others to be their own person too? The only type of man who would feel frightened at such an offer is the one that is afraid of his own divinity. Most people believe that failure is what ought to be feared. As a result, they dread opportunities themselves, because these represent the potential chance for a fuck-up. The mindset I just described is the surest way to live a life that will amount to nothing in the end. When life asks you if you want to slug it out, your answer should always be yes, because you didn't really have a choice to begin with. This wood will throw haymakers at you. It is then up to you to stand up and fight, or just take the beat down and stay prostrated for the rest of your pitiful existence. In the same vein, when Ohma asks you if you want to fight, you answer yes. This is a rare opportunity to reconnect with pain and regain your agency as a man, something that your domesticated spirit would never be able to attain on its own. The dolorous wake-up call of violence comes into your life as a blessing. too many people have never been punched in the face, and hence have no idea of what it feels like. The dead happens to them in a perilous situation, while being able to endure themselves during an altercation could be the difference between life and death. They will be lost. It is fully possible to exist in this reality while avoiding the real world, what with all the echo chambers and secure bubbles that have been put in place to blind you to the true nature of your societal surroundings. A fight is a reminder that the varnish of politeness that coats human interactions chips away at the first sign of trouble, at which point the one that subsists isn't the kind, but the strong. By way of significance, this means that the only true kindness stems from strength, as one can only be benevolent if he has the potential to be tyrannical. Something like vengeance doesn't even register to the mind of the fighting Stoic, as this would attach an emotional subtext to the act. As Ohma states, there is no point in avenging the dead, as their fate was directly caused by their inability to protect themselves. Rather, a lesson must be learned from their demise, that violence isn't discharged, it is directed, making it neither good nor evil. By not getting mad at his master's death, he demonstrates a practical application of everyday stoicism, keeping his feelings in check and denying them the reign of his life. Avenging a loved one is not for the sake of the fallen. Rather, it only serves to satisfy the one enacting the vendetta, and not to offer payback for the death of someone who is already long gone, which could be construed as an hedonistic expression of violence. The pursuit of pleasure, which gives birth to consumerism, is of course shunned by Ohma, who cares little about his appearance and clothes, electing to leave his hair long and shaggy, a motif replicated by the members of Fight Club who shave their heads to combat vanity. Such a particular disposition can scarcely be born from a life of comfort and excuses, which is what most of us were birthed into. Ohma, on the other hand, was abandoned in the worst ghetto on earth the second he was weaned, which would be an unavoidable death sentence for 99% of the population. This environment forced him to grow up quickly and absorb life lessons that led to him reverting back to the most animalistic parts of his being at an early age. A state of development that is seemingly diametrically opposed to tame the monster within us to graduate into men. And indeed, the early life of Tokita was the perfect example of an existence driven by instincts, closer in behavior to a wild beast than a human. This bestial portion exists in all of us to be tame. Therefore, any ideology that seeks to ignore it or denies its existence is faulty from the start. It is because the propensity towards violence exists that it can be canalized. And so for us modern men, the goal will be to call back to our now enshrouded shadows for the domestication process to begin, as leaving them buried is as dangerous as letting them run wild, for ourselves or others. Having had to become independent from the start, while arguably not the safest or most nurturing environment for a child, has left Ohma with a strong taste for self-sufficiency, a trait essential to the fighting Stoic, in that it represents an integral part of life as a man. Regardless of what our progressive society says, men are warriors, and they will always be treated as expendable. As such, it is up to you to find and define your own value. Independence isn't really an option, it's a necessity, because the rest of the world will treat you as if you had no use for help. The only valid way to come out of that situation on top is to turn this assumption into a reality. No one cares about men because they ought to care for themselves, and a dependent cannot do that. This is why Ohma refuses handouts, not out of pride or ego, but because he perceives them for the trap that they are. Notice that he also makes sure to include his friend with him. he who was about to succumb to temptation. The relationship between said friend, whose name is Yamashita, and Tokita Ohma is incredibly similar to that of Tyler Durden and his protege, a story I will be telling you another day, as it perfectly demonstrates the transformation of a beta male into a beautiful specimen of alpha. The one key difference is that in this case, Yamashita actually functions as Ohma's employer, which should translate into a certain degree of hierarchical domination. And indeed, this is a very real problem that any wannabe stoic will encounter. How can you be a good man, aka your own man, if you exist under the domination of a superior? Well, it really depends on if you believe in their superiority or not. You could accept that this person is the reason why you have a job and are able to eat and afford rent. Or you could decide that this is just a natural relationship based on an exchange of services that nets you resources because of your talent and hard work. A slave is only shackled so long as he believes he is one. Once you have freed your mind, concepts such as hierarchies morph back into their true form, that of structures of power that only wait on the back of those who allow it. In Ohma's case, he not only willingly enters that relationship, but he also demands big things from his employer. As an alpha, he can only follow another leader, and so he forces Yamashita to meet his criteria, bettering him in the process. Knowing your worth makes you dangerous, because you are less likely to be preyed upon or manipulated. However, make sure to not feed your ego to the point you become engrossed with yourself, or else you run the risk of becoming the very entity from which the true Stoic seeks to protect himself. This degenerative expression of the overconfident mind possesses all of the characteristics usually attributed to the stereotypical notion of the alpha male. Often domineering instead of dominant, depriving instead of nurturing, and attention-seeking instead of self-driven. To achieve balance as a leader takes self-awareness, a trait that Stoicism elevates to the rank of art. Its key concept being that anything man formulates is opinion, henceforth creating a clear distinction between objective and subjective notions. You can believe yourself to be of worth, while at the same time keeping a clear tab on your capacities and limits. Something Ohma demonstrates perfectly when he readily accepts to be reminded that he lost a fight. As he put it, "Why would I be mad over you stating facts?" Understanding what is within and without your control is the first step towards mastering your mind, a principle that starts and ends at the acceptation of your own death, an event that will be occurring no matter how much you struggle against fate. Fighting for survival while at the same time maintaining the intimate knowledge that your life will inevitably be claimed is a balancing act that most men never manage to achieve, either spending their existence fearing its inevitable end, or giving up altogether and sinking into the ideological pit that is nihilism. What they fear is not death itself, but the void that this concept represents, preventing them from reaching the unfathomable freedom that its acceptation brings. I'll ask you one more time. You want to fight too? Do you want to reclaim your life? Do you want to join me in the ranks of the living instead of wasting your life away in the herd of the dead? This is what it means to be an alpha. It's not puffing up your chest, chasing instant gratification, or accumulating riches. All of that takes you away from your true calling in life, that of becoming the best version of yourself and inspiring others to do the same. To get to that place you were always meant to be will only take one thing: the will to fight. Ohma, by his very existence, reminds you that this energy exists, because if it is within him, then it is within you as well. As a leader, he doesn't press forward for his sole benefit alone. Rather, he does so to show you the way, and to prove to you that it can be done. In a sense, he holds the most dangerous of positions, because if he falters, the group falters as well. This role is not a sustainable one, and it shouldn't be one to start with, as the alpha really only serves as a model that will eventually be replaced by the very individuals he aimed to inspire. That individual, which became the alpha of the group as a result of a will to power, ends up benefiting the collective through his self-serving ways, by prioritizing its evolution, giving birth to more strong individuals via ideological parthenogenesis. Each leader creates 10, and 10 create 100. The idea that some people are born to be alphas, while others are born to be betas, is an irremediable misunderstanding of that simple social dynamic, due also to the pernicious belief that the role of a leader is to crush and take advantage of the masses he managed to conquer. In truth, the alpha is the you that you wanted to be, but never could be. It is that version of your being that you have always envisioned as your ideal, but that never came to existence because of your own fears and inadequacies. If you are a beta, it's because you live like one. If you truly want to make a change and retake control over your future, then heed the words of Ohma Tokita and start living your life as a fighting stoic. The reason why you could never be the you that you always wanted to be isn't because you weren't meant to, but because you never meant to. It's time you finally be the person you want to be, not just for your sake, but also for that of those around you, who are waiting permission to do the same. Fight on.